I am your host, Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. The guy behind me is the Ken doll behind me, I should say, is Justin Trudeau. He is the Prime Minister of Canada. And Trudeau is involved in a bit of a political scandal. Trudeau should be involved in a political scandal. Trudeau should, in my opinion, resign. That's how bad this is. This case bugged the hell out of me, and I couldn't quite figure out why, because I don't live in Canada, I live in the United States. But there are commonalities with this case to things that I can quite understand here in the United States, and I would explain why. Justin Trudeau has just destroyed the Liberal Party. That's my position, that's my argument. And I think my argument is damn right. Well, I should say, I think I am so right on this. And I invite people to give their opinions below. But the idea that this is dividing Canada, that there are liberals that are fighting about who's right about this, is shameful to me. It should be very clear about who's right or what's right in this particular case. So I'm going to share a bit of my clarity here. And I understand that's smug, but again, in this particular case, I think I am right. SNLC Lavalin breaks the law. They go into another country and bribes officials in Libya. Now, for whatever they were bribing them for, it's an engineering firm, but they were bribing officials in Libya. You can understand that this sets pretty grim incentives for companies if they were allowed to do this. There are reasons that this is against the law, not just in Canada, but also in the United States. Imagine bribing officials to keep minimum wage down, to keep worker rights down. Maybe you want to get some advantage for your company, whatever that is. I'm just saying these are not necessarily incentives we want to put into the political process. Things other than profitability, clearly, at least from the standpoint of law, matters more. Human rights, fair play, in the standpoint of business, those things, at least again in law, on this law, matter more. They broke the law. They get caught. And whatever happens to them in this case is being adjudicated in a court of law. Justin Trudeau intercedes in this and tries to get Jody, wilson-raybould to scuttle the case. Give him a fine. Just get rid of this. This may cause jobs. Scuttle the case. Send it away. She tells her no. And the fact that she can tell him no gets something across that there's a separation of powers here. Meaning, the Prime Minister is not the judicial branch of Canada. There's something distinct. He is pressuring her to get rid of this case, something that is, again, being adjudicated in Canadian law. She tells him no. Kick rocks. He continues to pressure her over and over and over again. And eventually, she gets demoted. And eventually, just yesterday, gets kicked out of the party entirely. Now, what precipitated her getting kicked out of the party is because she released evidence of her story that Justin Trudeau was, I guess up to this point, denying. Her tapes got across very clearly that the Prime Minister was pressuring her over the course of a period of time to drop the case. And now they're kicked out of the party. And I listened to Trudeau give his take on this, and Trudeau clearly admits that these were conversations that they were having where they were trying to get her to see a different point of view on this. But again, there is a separation of powers here, and there's something disturbing that a company in its race to maximize profit gets a pass from the Canadian Prime Minister, and then there is doubt about who's divisive, who's wrong, about where the problem lies. The problem lies with the Prime Minister that intrudes into the judicial branch in order to try to force it to give a particular outcome that he wanted. Again, the fact that he couldn't wave his hand almost like a magic wand and do this himself shows that there is a separation of powers at work. Trudeau was the problem, not Jody Wilson. And again, her releasing of the tapes was because in order to back up her particular point of events, which is the Prime Minister intruded into a judicial process in order to try to get me to scuttle a case, and when I didn't do it, he got rid of me and put his own guy in order to affect the outcome. She's not the problem. whatever issues the Liberal Party is having here, what the Liberal Party is having some fight over this. What's the fight that you're having? The only way that Jody Wilson-Raybould is the problem is if corruption is just one of those aspects of the Liberal Party of Canada that's okay, and that it was more important that she toe the line in this. Not necessarily follow any notion of law, but toe the line. If the Prime Minister tells you to scuttle the case, then you should scuttle the case. Even if they broke the law, and even if the breaking of that law, there were criminal proceedings that should have taken place had not the Prime Minister tried to intercede. This is gross. This is entirely gross. Shameful of individuals who look at this and say the problem is Jody. That is not the case. I watched Trudeau give this speech where, in this odd, smug way, he acted as if they were being divisive. They were being divisive. Is the Liberal Party okay with corruption? If that answer is yes, then okay, maybe they were being divisive. But if she's sticking to the principle of, I'm going to let the law play out, and if this company gets, or if the people within this company get perp walked, then they get perp walked, that is just the law of Canada, then she is not the problem. She was doing her job. It is the Prime Minister himself that started and initiated this by trying to get her to do something that she was well within her right under Canadian law to tell him no. Not to mention, there's a problem with him asking in the first place. Assume for the moment that Donald Trump, and by the way, another question, do all companies get this? Meaning, this pass that Justin Trudeau wants to allow in the bribing of officials in other countries, essentially this breaking of the law, does every other company get this? This bypass? And if so, what's so special about this particular company that it gets this particular pass? You can call it the Trudeau exception. What's the point of the law in the first place? I guess I'm getting something more basic to the point of political corruption than economic corruption. And the idea that the Liberal Party is okay with this under this idea of unity is rather shameful. It's rather shameful. Pretend for the moment that Donald Trump, yeah, that's a good one. Pretend for the moment that Donald Trump, that Sheldon Adelson wants to put a casino in, let's say, Kenya. And let's say Kenya has certain laws in the books that say, no, you can't necessarily do this. And just that, they'll have also laws in the books that with foreign companies, maybe you have to pay them a certain amount commensurate with the rate of wages in your country minus a certain factor. Adelson bribes a politician or multiple politicians in the country in order to allow him to open a casino. It's somewhat of an exception because only he can open up casinos in this country based on this exception, not to mention an exception based on wages. Supplying that casino was a business that he also had back in the States that allowed him to essentially send those supplies to fuel that company, meaning that the company in America also was able to hire workers based on what he did illegally in Kenya. He gets caught. And let's say when he gets caught, Trump leans on the Justice Department to say, look, I need you to scuttle this. Scuttle this. Get rid of this. That's not a lot. Let's just settle it with a fine. We don't want you to press too hard on this because there may be people who lose jobs in the States. And the Justice Department says, no, we're not going to scuttle this. This is a criminal matter, and it is going to run its course. They're either going to be found guilty or innocent. They're either going to be perp walked or not. And maybe with a fine, but ultimately, it will settle its course. The President of the United States is a separate branch, and it's a separate branch for a reason. This is justice. This is not a matter for politics. Trump fires the person who's in charge. It's not Sessions. Let's say it was Sessions. Fires Sessions. Puts in his own guy. And that guy comes up and says, okay, we're going to make this a fine. What would be the outcry if that was made public? People's heads would explode. I mean, this is outright political corruption. This is kind of my point. I don't quite understand why there's this conflict in the Liberal Party over this very issue. This woman was doing the right thing. Now, I think that the public itself is not divided on this per se. Meaning, the Liberal Party is divided on this because there a certain degree of politics. Hey, you should have shut up about that issue of outright corruption and just kind of towed the line. That's what you should have done. And we're angry at Jody Wilson because she didn't just toe the line as opposed to following the law. But I don't think the public is all that divided on this. Trudeau should have been walking pretty to this election victory. It is possible that Trudeau may lose, and this has tarnished the image of the Liberal Party and Trudeau himself over this very specific issue. Take a listen to Trudeau here. I want you to hear him, because this sounds entirely tone deaf to me, considering he was the one that was in the wrong. You shouldn't have tried to force her. All right, let's start right here. And that's... What am I doing? All right.
Caucus meeting, spoke to them about it, and then opened up the doors to the media so that he could speak. He talked about how Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpot had effectively broken trust with the party and with its caucus members. He also referred about the history of the Liberal Party. Here's what he had to say.
The old Liberal Party was notorious for infighting. People on the same team used to identify themselves not as liberals, but as hyphenated liberals. My leadership was a commitment to change that. Civil wars within parties are incredibly damaging because they signal to Canadians that we care more about ourselves than we do about them.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? You intruded in a judicial issue in order to get them to change whatever justice would have been, meaning you wanted to contort justice to whatever you wanted it to be, and something that was outright against the law. Now, if the company would have been given a fine just based on the natural flow of justice, that's one thing. But this is a company that was trying to maximize its profit and broke the law in order to maximize its profit. And you wanted to just give it a pass. What you're talking about here in regards to this infighting, yeah, maybe there is infighting because you decided to try to do something that you had no business doing. This is the point that I'm getting at. The argument that's being made here is these people are being divisive. But they're being divisive because they wanted to follow the law. If the Liberal Party is okay with corruption, then yes, they're being divisive. If the Liberal Party is not okay with corruption, then the problem here is Trudeau. The problem here is not the people who are trying to allow justice to run its course. And I'm saying this from America because I get sick of political corruption. It oozes out of the pores of this nation. This country runs on cash. And I see this and I cringe. The idea that you guys have any question about this. There's one more clip that I want to show for this. 233. It's just an odd, tone-deaf appraisal of what's taking place.
We've taken every effort to address their concerns. But ultimately, if they can't honestly say that they have confidence in this team, despite weeks of testimony, face-to-face conversations, and phone calls with myself and other members of caucus, then they cannot be part of this team.
And you could hear it. Couldn't see it, but you could hear it. This is tone deaf. What do you mean part of your team? Your team is doing something that your team had no business doing, and the rest of the public understands that. And to make that point more clear, this idea of your team and my team, and they should have just hung up, done whatever the team wanted it to do, even if it was vindictively corrupt. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Well, I should say viciously corrupt. That's better. It's not about your team, dude. You were doing something that you had no business doing. That was the inciting event. Just understand, all of this talk about division and all of infighting and all this other stuff, all of this started because Trudeau tried to get the Justice Department to give a company a pass that the company didn't deserve. Take a look at this. These are some of the polling numbers on this. Right here. Polls suggest Canadians are closely watching the SNLT Lavalin play out. The people believe her by a magnificent margin. What is this, 70%? Over Trudeau's story of events. And her releasing the tapes show that she was absolutely right. The Prime Minister was trying to scuttle the case. Something he had no business doing. And right here. Justin Trudeau, Canadian Prime Minister, embroiled in allegations that his office improperly interfered in a corruption case involving one of the country's biggest companies in his native Montreal. Not alleged, he did. There are tapes to prove that he did. Justin Trudeau came out and in the speech that he gave after the tapes were released, kind of confirmed that he did, using additional language. Instead of coerce, he might have said some, trying to talk to her. But whatever, he still attests to the fact that he did. Why is this in doubt in regards to who is at fault and who's to blame? The Kindle behind me is the one that started this. He is to blame. He is the one that right now is destroying the Liberal Party. His actions in a corruption case, intruding in a case that he had no business intruding. It was vilely corrupt. Again, imagine Donald Trump doing something like that for somebody who gave him campaign donations. You wouldn't feel so good about it. But he's wearing his face. And everybody else is like, oh, I don't know. I'm squeamish about getting rid of Trudeau. Yeah. Trudeau's the fault here. Just to be very clear. I'll end this here. Thanks all.